Hey, welcome back. It's May 22nd, and apologies that I'm issuing quite a few video clips more than I usually do. But in a recent day or two, we are starting to see a whole heap of movement and changes, which I think you ought to know about. And it all stemmed from the rather great news the other day, yesterday in fact, where we've seen Bitcoin reaching its all-new time high of 109,000. Now it's hovering $111,000 per coin. And why I'm sending out this other clip, because yesterday in fact, and this is why we all ought to watch with a close eye on what the US is doing, because they are leading or attempting to lead the pack in terms of establishing itself as that crypto capital of the world, which is certainly doing and taking it seriously. And evidence of that is the fact that Senator Loomis, as you know, she's dubbed as the crypto queen in the US, where she's responsible and part of the US administration led by President Trump, and together with David Sachs, who is the crypto and AI czar in the country, she's responsible to actually implement pieces of legislation, a heap of legislation to do with creating a market infrastructure regime for stablecoins and digital assets. And also there's talks about doing something specific for Bitcoin. And in fact, yesterday, she actually announced that there is a bipartisan ruling on establishing the regulatory framework for digital assets in the US, which is fantastic news. And that is dubbed the Genie Act. There's another act which I think is called Stable Act, and that's to do with providing regulatory clarity specifically for stablecoins. As we all know, stablecoins are like fiat-backed stablecoins. So there's a couple of great examples of US-backed stablecoins, namely Tether and Circle. Those are the main two private issuer firms responsible for US-backed stablecoins. Now, as a result of these two pieces of legislations, one of which has already been announced yesterday, as I said before, by Loomis, and the other one is to do with stablecoins. Well, by providing this piece of legislation in the country, what would that mean is trying to provide regulatory clarity in order to pull in the fintech companies responsible for, let's say, Tether, in the case of stablecoins, and other crypto fintech players into the country, so that they can bring along with them not just the actual capacity to build and innovate and drive those tokens, digital tokens, in the US, so they can capitalize on the 0% tariff regime, which we all know about, but also to bring in a whole heap of capital, new investment capital, to establish in the country, to bring in new jobs, new digital asset jobs, blockchain developer jobs, and so on in the US, so that they can drive the innovation, so they can be seen to be at the spearheading the actual crypto innovation that is desperately needed and pledged by Trump, if you recall, in his electoral campaign. So what I'm trying to say is there's an awful lot of movement going on at the moment during this week that you really need to pay very close attention. And if I were to sum up, what does this mean in terms of how we could compartmentalize the crypto industry? Well, we have the denominated digital property asset. So for me, it's fundamentally Bitcoin, because that's the ultimate digital property asset there is. It's a store of value. There is cryptocurrencies or digital currencies. So you got Tether, stablecoin, which is the US fiat-backed stablecoin. For me, that is a leader in that classification. And then there's a third type to do with the rest of the tokens, the rest of the utility tokens. So for me, if I were to place my bets on how I would allocate my portfolio, and particularly where I'm conscious that I need to move away from my fiat analog assets into the digital realm, well, certainly I'll put a greater proportion of that in Bitcoin as a store of value. So I use that as a savings account, not like a savings account, use that, more as a long-term store of value, like a pension scheme, if you like to have an analogy that help you understand that. For me, that would be the pension scheme. So when I retire, I can then capitalize on the significant gains that I'm expected to receive as a result of holding my Bitcoin in the long term when I reach my age of retirement. And then as a savings account, I would use Tether, stablecoins. I've actually created a whole heap of videos that explains the differences between what is a a CBDC, the central bank digital currency, stablecoins on the other, and Bitcoin as a third part. Because for me, I've always been advocating that for me, stablecoins should not be treated as a store of value, but rather as a kind of a savings account, checkings account, to actually, manage your day-to-day expenses. Why? Because the value proposition around stablecoins is to enable cross-border payments, like a payment rail system, that would eventually replace the credit card SWIFT regime, which is very cumbersome. It takes several days to settle transactions over SWIFT and between bank to bank. Also, is very expensive. So if you think about the typical 3.5% credit card fees from Visa or MasterCard for every payment that we make, you can imagine how much we would reduce that if we use Tether as stablecoin for those transactions. So what I'm trying to say is, for me, stablecoins should be treated as that savings account, that day-to-day savings account, and as a pension scheme provider, I would use Bitcoin as that long-term, long store of value wealth, in order to preserve your capital and to even grow it and mature it when you decide to cash in. So that's all I really want to bring to your attention today. There's an awful lot going on, and please subscribe to my channel, as I regularly publish some interesting videos such as these, some of which do with news and developments like this one, and there's a heap of others that are really how-to or explain what the actual concept behind Bitcoin, stablecoins, and the rest of the digital assets, which it's the whole point of my channel. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to hit the like button, to share the video to friends and colleagues at work, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel, as I regularly publish some instant videos such as these, anything to do with Bitcoin, blockchain technology, and the future of finance. So till next time.